I've seen studies from D1 college athletes where they took MRI imaging of their ACLs. They showed the before and then at the end of the season, so preseason, end of the season. And these were in healthy ACLs. You wouldn't believe the inflammation in those ACLs. They were like thick, they were inflamed and tired. That's in a D1 physically mature athlete that's getting the right training.
Hi, guys. Welcome to the Strong Female Athlete Podcast. Just want to give a quick shout out to our official sponsor, Simply Faster, a company dedicated to better tools and better technology for athlete development. If you're serious about gaining speed and power, I highly recommend you check out their amazing products and technology that's really taking athletes and coaches to the next level. So be sure to check them out, and let's get into today's guest. Dave, welcome back to the podcast for the
Thank,
20th time.
thank you so much. I love your platform because you tell the truth, and that's what parents and young athletes need. So whenever you give me the opportunity, I'm going to say yes.
I love it. And I always look forward to our Fridays when we record. It's just so fun to talk with you about everything strength training, youth athlete development, which is really your wheelhouse. I think, we were just talking off air that now more than ever, parents of young athletes need to find strength coaches who understand youth athlete development, growth and maturation, what's going on within each age and stage of development, and how training should align with that. And that's what we're going to talk about today is when to start strength training. And this is a question I get often. And I think when people ask, they also don't really know the definition of strength training because, like you said, it's not just loading with a barbell and getting kids to do a CrossFit class. So let's maybe start there. What is strength training?
I love that because again, I think the misconception for a lot of different reasons, you and I talk about social media all the time. That's part of the problem. But the misconception is it has to be about a barbell on their back, or they have to be doing a heavy deadlift, or even have dumbbells in their hand. How I have always looked at strength training, especially for younger kids. So let's just to put numbers to it, in my gym, we started at 6 years old. It's like, what? You have No, right? At six, we start to introduce more traditional lifts in middle school. Um, but just to put it in context, so people are like, well, you're talking about high school kids or whatever, as young as six, resistance training. What I mean by that is giving their bodies a load, whether it's internally or externally, meaning their own body weight in ways that stimulates their system, simulates their musculoskeletal system. So what does that look like from a practical standpoint? You and I were talking offline before. It could mean jumping off of a 24-inch box or surface and landing, or just jumping up and down and landing with great landing skills and teaching that aspect of it too. Because we know what happens when our body weight leaves the ground and gravity's pulling us back down toward it. There's a tremendous amount of forces on our body and our muscles when we land. And we're having the kids reaccelerate and jump again. For a young child, that's strength training, right? So, and that's just with an internal load as far as I define it, in meaning body weight. But I use 4 pound medicine balls. I use resistance bands. I use any external object that they have to manipulate, meaning move under control, especially if it's, 4 pounds isn't a lot of weight. But if I have that young athlete throw it and catch it and throw it and catch it, they have to produce force externally and release it just like they do in sport, it means a lot of different things. It could mean different plank variations. It could mean, in ways, parts of calisthenics. And I'll go back to this, and it'll probably lead into something else we wanted to mention today. In PE classes, and it used to be gymnastics, rolling, tumbling, pushing, holding yourself up, standing on one leg, right? We could talk about this, single leg deficit. It's harder to stand on one leg than it is two, right? So giving our young athletes as many opportunities as possible, as young as possible, to increase their overall, what I call systemic strength, head to toe. Curls are cool, and they have their place at times, but I'm huge on full body moving, pulling, pushing, changing elevation, moving laterally, moving rotationally under some type of load or stress that again stimulates their system. So that's hopefully that adds some clarity. When we talk about strength training, it's not just lifting weights. Lifting weights is an aspect of strength training.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really great way to put it. And I think when I say all female athletes must strength train to be healthy, I mean they must strength train, like you said, in alignment with where they're at in their development, whether that's body weight, resistance, or just various stimuli in a gamified setting, especially for those younger ones. And we'll talk about the importance of gamifying soon. But then maybe middle school, like you said, those more traditional lifts, if they're ready for it, deadlift, learning how to hinge, then really loading it with a hex bar and making sure they're executing well and not rounding their back or hurting themselves. So, again, this is why it's so important to work with a professional who understands these stages in development and knows when to progress with load. I think, a lot of the times people say, well, what age should they deadlift? And I'm like, I mean, it could be anywhere from age 12 to 14 when they start with a heavy hex bar. It really depends on
Right.
what they did prior in childhood, their level of coordination, stability, and mobility, or maybe they're in early mature. So maybe they're chronologically age 13, but they really are 14 and a half biologically, and they're moving along quick. I have a lot of girls like that who are deadlifting over 100 pounds at that age and doing it well. So I think it also takes the coach's eye too, which again comes back to hiring the right professional who knows what to look for.
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad you said that. And conversely, we could have a 12-year-old chronologically that physically is 10 or 11, right? They could be physically immature for their chronological age. So again, it's meeting them where they are, developmentally, emotionally, psychologically, maturity wise. Are they mature enough to handle an external load in their hands? And you talked about a deadlift and when, and a lot of times, and people don't like this answer because it sounds like I'm just being super vague. It depends. And one of the things you just said is so important. It depends on what they've been doing previously and their chronological and actual physical age, their training age. You know this, and we operate the same way. If I get a new client that's say 14 years old and they've been working with a personal trainer or someone else for the last few years, for whatever reason, now they're with me, their training age when I see them for the first time is zero because I don't know what their strengths and weaknesses are, what their needs are. Maybe we need to work on mobility before I can externally load them in some ways. And so it depends. So to give just, well, we don't start until 12 years old. It depends on what the activities are. Is it traditional lifting? Is it lifting weights? Is it, if I, and you mentioned deadlifts, that's such a popular exercise right now because it's so beneficial. We both use it with our athletes in different ways and at the right times. If I give a, I have a medicine ball that's like this big. It weighs 10 pounds, so it's really dense. If I have an 8-year-old pick that up off the ground, that's a deadlift for them. At the very least, depending on how they perform it, the first time I ask them to do it, it's a deep squat
Hmm.
with a load on their system. So that is strength training as well. Um, and but with the younger ones, it has to be, in my opinion, more task orientated. You mentioned gamification. There has to be a task behind it. So it could be as simple as, okay, Erica, I want you to pick up this ball and hand it to me. And then I get to observe and watch how they do it. But the task is pick the ball up and hand it to me. It's not 3 sets of 10 squats with a 5 pound dumbbell and a goblet hold. And the reason for that is it may be super fun the first time, but it gets old fast for a young child. It gets really, it gets tired as they, I'm not trying to do that anymore. And the reason is because they're not going to make the connection between strength and being better at their sport, right? And from my standpoint, if I do 3 sets of 10 anything, at the end of it with a younger athlete, we're left with 3 sets of 10 or whatever we did. There's very little transference. There's very little connection to the movement. There's very little development of a positive relationship with working out, very little development of a physical culture about them. So they want to do it. It's just part of who they are, so forth and so on. So, but it's so important, not just for the now, because I know we wanted to talk about this as well, to help them now, but also to help them in the future for so many reasons. And I hope at some point we can talk about why it's needed, and also talk about, as you had already mentioned, their history. What have they been doing prior? Not enough, in my opinion. But in general, in the United States, also I can say, and especially in my area, they're not doing enough.
And do you mean just not enough movement in general, not enough variety? Hey guys, just want to take a quick moment to shout out our sponsor, Simply Faster, and one of my favorite speed timing systems from them, the Freelap. I use it for my own sprint training as well as for my athletes, and they love it. It's super easy to set up, you can take it to the field on your own, and you can get accurate speed times to track your progress. Check the Freelap link in the caption below to start adding timing into your speed sessions. If you know me, you know I love my Freelap. If you're serious about speed, it's time to start timing.
Yes, everything. They're not playing. And so there's two things that I think are critical for parents and coaches to remember as we approach this subject in particular. Kids are growing up differently than they did, like when I did, when you did, even 15, 20 years ago. They're growing up much differently. There are other things to do, right? One of which is this, right? We have talked about this back in the day. We were never out of shape, like starting from ground zero, because we played outside all the time in some way. And that play developed the coordination to eventually lift weights and be better at it. It developed strength because we were changing elevation, we were getting up and down, we were sprinting on our bicycles. Like, you don't think that builds some systemic strength in your lower extremities? We
And
were
aerobic
developing
fitness.
balance. Yeah, aerobic and even anaerobic fitness. Where I grew up, I grew up in a very suburban area, climbing trees, pulling. If you didn't grow up in a suburban area, jungle gyms and swing sets and things of that nature, monkey bars. Kids are not developing strength at a young age. And I already mentioned PE, especially in public school systems. PE is changed to doing 6 to 8 week blocks of learning and activity, floor hockey, volleyball, badminton, you know, whatever. for the most part, that's what it is. There's no activities that work on spatial awareness, mobility and flexibility, how to properly warm up before you exercise, aerobic fitness. Like, you think these kids run any length of distance during gym classes if they have it for 20 minutes? Now it's the first thing to get bounced in the schedule if there's anything else to do, whether it's standardized testing or the winter concert we have to, practice. PE is the first thing to get bounced. So with a lack of that and a lack of play, free play outside with friends or individually, they're already at a deficit, which leads to my point of one of the main reasons they need strength training more than ever by someone that's qualified as soon as possible.
And someone who understands young athlete development, like the Jeremy Frisches of the world, the Dave Gleasons of the world. I mean, there is a lot of those people out there, but parents have to really do their research. There are more strength coaches in every state across the country who are certified in strength and conditioning, but they also know how to work with young kids, make it fun, give them variety with different forms of body weight resistance. I mean, Dave, some of your games I've seen on your page for like your 6 to 9 year old age group, they're so great. I think one of my favorite games you had, I don't know what it's called, but it's where you give them a bunch of objects and they have to get from point A to point B and walk
Hmm.
across using these objects, and you give them like a little like pad and then like a little stick to walk across. And oh my gosh, that is strength training too, because they're working so many different muscle groups to have ankle mobility. They're firing their glutes with the balance. And it's also fun. And parents listening, please stop signing your 8 year old up for this structured CrossFit style class where they're doing crappy split squats and they're wobbling over. Like, do something that is more engaging and that works a variety of muscle groups. We want them to love movement and love fitness. So, yeah, I mean, Dave has so many great videos on his page, so be sure to check it out. But yeah, I think it's so important for the young ones to get that fun, gamified resistance training.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for that. That that game was actually born out of my childhood. We had a stream behind our house, and when I was little, you know, grade school, like elementary school, I would get in trouble if I came back in the house, like my sneakers were all wet and I like fell in the little stream that was like, 8 inches deep. But there were rocks, and my next door neighbor and I would be trying to take whatever, it could be our bicycle, across the stream, stepping on those rocks. I'm holding my bike, which back then bicycles weighed like a ton. So we'd have to do it like together,
What a
right?
core workout.
Oh, it's everything. But so I call that game Cross the River, and I use either three balance pods, and the this is real quick because anyone can do this. Balance pods, or I'll use what's called an agility disc, is just a flat disc. If you don't have access to any of that, let your young kids color paper plates, and
Mm.
those are their magic lily pads or whatever. And if it's those, they can only be on one foot at a time. They can't slide the paper plates to the agility spots, and they have to cross the river. So you give them a distance of, say, depending on the age group, 10 to 20 feet. Get from one end to the other, and they have to take those pads with them. So what is it? Is bending over and twisting, balancing, core, tremendous activation of the quads, hamstrings, and glutes, ankle mobility and stiffness and strength. All these like buzzwords that all the strength trainers on Instagram and TikTok talk about. But in a way, like my kids ask for Cross the River. They're not going to ask me for 3 sets of 10 single leg deadlifts with 5 pounds for a warm up,
Or
right?
mini band walks.
Or mini band walks. It's like, hey, okay. right?
Yeah, you're better
So
off balancing for the glute medius
that's just
strength.
a really like this one example, and you can layer it and make it in a many different things. What Erica was actually mentioning is I made that game into a bigger game called Stranded. So now we've done this with up to 10 kids. So I've given them the paper plates or discs, balance pods. I have these real low balance beams, equalizer bar, like medicine ball, all these different objects. They have to go across the river, like in the first game, but every single object and every single person has to make it across without falling in. So if you touch the ground in any way, you have to go back to the beginning. So whether it's a single person, that's great. They have to creatively work themselves through that issue, that problem. How do I get across and bring all these things with me? When you interject teammates, now it's like I can't just worry about myself. I made it all the way across, but Erica's still at the beginning because she fell in. I have to go back and get her. And you just let them go. There's like, I'm not going to say zero coaching, but if you're patient enough and you're using it to observe how well your kids move and what their needs are, you don't coach this. Let them figure it out so that it's not, I know you've been on this lately, it's not rehearsed.
Mm,
Sports are not rehearsed. American football is probably the only sport that is closest to that. You're trying to run specific plays every time there's an actual play. But even with that, if it's rehearsed enough, the only good players there are the ones that can create out of when it goes sideways. I'm supposed to run straight ahead. My teammates didn't do their job, and there's three big guys trying to tackle me. What do I do? Right? So it's unrehearsed. So a game like that, Jeremy Frisch, who you mentioned, is a master at this too. We call it training density. There's strength training, balance, coordination, creativity. There's like 10 different things involved in one activity. But they're in their strength training. Now, when they come to someone like you or me, if they haven't been doing this with a trainer, yeah, we can put dumbbells in their hands relatively quickly because their training age, you and I will figure out, is is more advanced. They're ready and they've earned the right, as I put it to my athletes, to load a little bit more traditionally.
mm, yeah. I like that. There's a lot to unpack there. So basically, to summarize what age to start, like Dave said, it depends, but there's a certain range where we can start to consider those heavier lifts. I would
Hmm.
say like age 12, 12 and a half to 14. But again, it's going to really take the coach's eye, understanding the history of the athlete, what's going on with the athlete in front of you. Are they ready? I want to come back to your games. And you mentioned something about not coaching these games. And I think from the outside looking in, parents think there's no coaching going on. And I've been wrestling with this concept a lot. What is good coaching? Is it over cueing your athletes and making it look like you're coaching them and all these cues you're throwing out at them are actually helping? Or is good coaching setting up the environment to get the specific adaptations you want, whether it's strength or coordination or speed or agility? And then within that, allowing the athlete to explore. So there's still structure, but it's structure within setting up the environment for the creativity to come out within that. I think that is good coaching. And I think parents need to beware of, oh, well, this coach threw out like 10 cues at my athlete. That's definitely what did it. That's definitely what helped them. And that's why they played well that weekend. I'm like, was it? Or were they just lucky that one time?
Right, right.
I talk about this a lot with my husband because he works in baseball pitching. Oh my gosh, the pitching world's a mess, but there's all these pitching coaches being like, okay, now put your arm here and then get your lead leg at 20 degrees and all these like numbers. And the kid's like, wait, what do I do with all that? And my husband's like, yeah, I learned to throw hard by my grandpa just telling me to chuck the ball over the backyard fence.
100%. What I was
It's the
thinking about when I
environment. It's the environment getting the adaptation.
young kids, boys and girls, the way I taught them to throw hard was with small dodgeballs. We would throw it against my wall in the
Mhm.
gym, and we would make different sounds, right? So, and I'll get to the context of what you're saying in a second. And so it's your husband's right. So it's like if I say to any athlete, throw it against the wall, and that's it. If they throw it against the wall and it comes back to them, great job. That's the only direction I gave him. Now, let's talk about velocity. I want you to make as loud of a sound against the wall as you can. What are they going to do?
Throw it hard.
They're going to throw it harder. But if I just say throw it harder, or I need your elbow higher, I need to start here. Let's, rotate through your ribs, make sure you're stabilizing your scapula, or you're getting that retract. Like, what? Right. So back to your point, this is really, really important for parents to know this as well, because your point is really, really important. Over coaching isn't better coaching. I call it joysticking. It's like, when I had video games, we had this like single joystick little, like, and you made the character move. When they're constantly like, all right, Erica, hips back, chin up, like during the movement, and you're trying to coach them through that, this is the truth now. It seems like it's great coaching, but it causes goal confusion and frustration in a young athlete. And there's
And
too many
overthinking,
thought patterns there.
overthinking their every move.
100%. So, um, and this also goes into the age context that you were talking about. So what we really need to do is what we call outcome-based coaching and reflective coaching. Outcome-based coaching is just my baseball example. If I ask, I'll use a different example. If I ask a young athlete to skip 10 yards and then turn around and skip back to me, when they get back there, regardless of how it looks, great job. Why? They did what I asked to the best of their ability. Even if it looked like, oh, I'm like, I don't care. I didn't ask them to care. I didn't ask them to have great arm mechanics. I didn't ask them to have great posture. All I asked them to do was skip. Now, reflectively, so after the fact, here's where the coaching comes in. All right, that was really good. Now let's just use you. Erica, great job skipping. This next time, what I want you to try to do, I want you to see how this feels. I want you to swing your arms as fast as you can while you're skipping. Just see how that feels. Ready? Go. And I'm not swing them faster. No, bend your elbow. No,
Right.
loose hands, loose face. You get back. Erica, great job. How did that feel? Did you notice anything? 99 times out of 100, I don't care if it's a 6-year-old, they'll say, yeah, I skipped way faster. What did they just learn? The importance of arm mechanics when we're running, because skipping is the foundation of speed, in my opinion, right? So without getting technical and what I call form-based coaching, you see, that's the differentiator. In my opinion, that's great coaching. If I'm on them, if I'm like breaking down every other step they take while they're skipping, it's going to take longer to learn it, and there'll be no permanence in it. Now, if we're talking about strength training to keep it, where we are today, it's the same thing. It's the same exact thing. Now, here are your priorities. You coach safety first. So, what is the one cue, the one change, the one coaching tip you can give your young athlete that makes the biggest impact on the safety of that lift first? I don't need it to look great because the other thing is if we're just looking at a squat or a deadlift, everybody moves differently. I could be the same exact height as Erica, but I have a longer femur or thigh bone and shorter tibia or shin bone than Erica does, right? Her makeup is she has a really long shin bone, and everyone's made differently. Our hips are set up differently. Like our structure is different. I want Erica to deadlift or squat the best that she can. So again, it takes a trained eye
Yeah.
to say, like, okay, we're gonna do, whatever it is, and then great job doing whatever it is. If it was a squat, one of my first cues is I'm going to stand right in front of you. I want you to look at the logo on my chest the entire time. Now, what does that do? They go from here to straight, or they go from here to straight. Now their spinal posture is better. Spinal posture is better. Typically, hip action's better, knee action's better, ankle action's better, and they squat a little more smooth, right? And we also want to take advantage of a young athlete's brain, the supercomputer. It's going to figure it out faster than we are. And it's searching for a pattern that feels good. So, coach to safety and technique, it's still reflective, but it's as little coaching, and that's the art of coaching, in my opinion, a little coaching as you can handle. But and I know I know you want to chime in. I have one more really important point, and that's like how much you do that. Little kids, it's almost 100% outcome based coaching. When
Yeah.
we start teaching lifts, say in middle schoolers, because I also want them to be really proficient at it by the time they get to high school, where they're going to be either unsupervised or just asked to do one rep max on day one. I want them to know what they're doing, so we're teaching it. Middle schoolers, I'll add in like 25% of it maybe is form-based coaching. The rest is still outcome. If it's an elite athlete, it's 50-50. That's as high as I go. That's it. To put it in context, like technique, form-based versus outcome-based. Because, and I also don't want parents to think, so you just let them go willy-nilly. That's not what I'm saying at all.
No. There's always a plan in place, and the plan
Mm-hmm.
that's in place is you're setting up, I don't like to call them drills, I like to call them games, small-sided games. You're setting up the small-sided games to elicit a certain response, whether it's they're
Mm-hmm.
learning better balance, or they're learning how to scan better and get their head on a swivel, or they're working on speed through a fun chase race.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that's where the planning and structure is, and then within that is the exploration, which is what young ones really need. We really need to get them to love training and love movement.
And I agree 100%. It also helps with what Erica and I call transference. What they do with us is for the field.
Yeah.
I don't need them to become a lifter. If they do, they're not becoming better at soccer, they're becoming a better lifter, right? You are what you train to be, right? Like specific adaptations to impose demands. So we are doing everything we can to set them up for success on the field, where Eric and I want nothing more for them to be able to perform at their best there. And that's a really, really important distinction between what we see on social media, where like, no, look at how they perform in the gym. Look what my kids can do. And it's
Yeah.
if it doesn't help them on the field, on the pitch, it doesn't matter. And most of the time, from what Erica and I see, it's not appropriate.
Yeah, and that play, those fun games with all the variety of working different muscle groups young will help them when they get into that more structured strength program to really put on some strength, develop power and speed for the game. And I think it's so important to just like reiterate, okay, resistance training, young, is usually body weight, a bunch of different fun objects, and it should be fun. Now, when they get to that middle school around age like 12, 13, okay, now we can look at the athlete and consider, okay, we might be ready for some decent load here. And
Mm-hmm.
I have girls who are 13 right now, and some of them are at completely different stages. Like I have a 13-year-old girl already deadlifting with amazing form over 100 pounds for six
Mm-hmm.
reps, and she's crushing it. But again, she's an early mature. She has great genetics and just overall coordination. Like she just moved really well on day one. And then the other girl, she's a little bit of a late mature. She needs a little bit more training variety and some like basic foundation under her belt. But recently, after a couple months of that, she is now actually next week moving on to a loaded front squat. So just because her body weight squat looks great now, so it's time to go. It's time to keep it moving. So I think, yeah, it's just important. There is that age range where some girls can move on, and some girls, it just might be a few months longer. And that's okay. Like Dave said, safety first and proper progression first. And too
Yeah.
often, and I know you and I have been sending back and forth, there's a lot of videos on social media where I see like 12-year-old girls deadlifting. I'm like, ooh, their back is really rounding. Like that is going to cause some low back pain. And we're loading bad movement patterns. So there's that. Like we need to be aware of that as well. So yeah, it's just really scary. Or seeing under 12-year-olds doing like a 30-pound split squat with 15s in each hand, and they're wobbling over, knee is caving in, their trunk is collapsing forward. And I'm like, oh, geez, that is a recipe for a knee injury in a chaotic environment because they just can't handle that weight. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Just loading movement patterns too soon when the form's not quite there yet and they're not ready for it.
Hmm. That's a great one. I have a lot to say on this. So, I want parents to know this: strength training has the ability to make whatever they do and however they do it more permanent. So it's not just get stronger and that will help this and that will help this and help me do this. Strength training, depending on their movement patterns, will help set in those movement patterns, good or bad. So let's say that the girl that you've been working with, and by the way, what Erica's talking about, and why I love conversing with her, is because she's truly about development. The younger, well, the one girl that's going to load for the first time next week, Erica's developing her. Development isn't strength training. It's a part of strength training when they're ready. It's an aspect of it. So if Erica did not do what was correct and appropriate, she loaded this girl a month ago where her knee alignment isn't right. She's lacking mobility in her ankles. She can't control her trunk,
That was the main
right?
one. Why I
There's
couldn't.
no control
Yeah.
there. There's no integrative active core strength, right? Most kids aren't really weak in their core. Could they be stronger? Yeah, but it's just not turning on when it needs to be. So Erica just says, nah, I'm just gonna load this girl. We need to get her stronger. The weight that she gives that girl has the ability to make those incorrect movement patterns, the wobbliness, the knees out of alignment, all those things more permanent. How do you think that translates to the soccer field? Now she's moving inefficiently on the soccer field for thousands and thousands of steps and sprint steps with maximal force when she's really trying to accelerate. Think that's good for her body? No. Do you think that could contribute to the potentiation, the potential of injury? Yes. Do you think it's going to detract from her overall performance and therefore confidence, which is a downward spiral? Yes. So it has to be at the right time for that individual. Loading too soon can be super, super detrimental. It's like a volcano. You're not going to see it that day most of the time. It builds up to the point where something happens that sidelines them either for a little bit or unfortunately for a long time.
Mhm. Yeah, and Dave, as you were talking there, the trunk falling forward was kind of the main thing that was holding me back from progressing her to front squatting,
Hmm.
because I just didn't want to make that movement pattern worse, where she's falling forward and then the mechanical load on her knees is even more. So we took just a few more weeks to build up that hip mobility, that core strength, and now she's ready to go, and she's also really excited about it. And I think also it's important to communicate with girls, like if they see some other girls progressing sooner, it's just we just have to remind them, hey, you're on your own journey. Everyone's
Hmm.
lifting a different weight in here. No matter what age you are, or if you're the same age, everyone's lifting a different weight regardless because you're on your own program. And it's not going to be like you falling back if we wait a couple more weeks to load. Like, if anything, it's going to get you a step ahead. And then we don't need to take 10 steps back later when you get injured because we rushed it. So I just see too much rushing of the young ones into the loaded strength training for honestly
Hmm.
social media clout. I mean,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
just trainers being like, look, like these young girls are lifting heavy. And I'm like, yeah, but their form is crap. I'm sorry. Like, did you even coach this? Like, it
Right.
just blows my mind. Yeah, and I talk about it a lot with you, with Carmen Bott, who is just so amazing in this space. So it's very frustrating, and I think it's just hard for parents to sift through it all and to know who to
Hmm.
trust, who's developing and doing the right thing. I mean, my God, we're up against a lot here.
Well, don't get me wrong, because I talked about one of the really important factors to start resistance training or strength training as early as we can is because they're not getting what they need when they're younger. So, and I can see how some strength coaches and even parents are like, well, we have to make up for lost time, right? So we have to go from 0 to 100. Like I have to put her in a situation where she's deadlifting and squatting and doing, what like externally loading as heavy as possible to make up for lost time. We can't do that with a human being. It's not linear. It doesn't just you can't make up that time. We can accelerate it exactly the way that Erica did it with her young athlete. You work on what needs to be worked on first, and then a couple months for a middle schooler. Is it worth taking a couple months for a middle schooler to get it right so that when she's 16, she's doing things other kids can't do
Exactly.
or they wish they could do? So, and you and I use the school analogy all the time. If for some reason, I missed out on 3 years of math class starting at third grade, when I'm in seventh grade, you can't just give me, you know, sophomore level algebra or trigonometry or whatever. I still have to go through the steps. Yes, I'm behind, and maybe I have to go to summer school to catch up,
Yeah.
right? Maybe I need a little bit more frequency and consistency. I know this one's big with you. Consistency with training so that it adds up so that I can slowly catch up. Because here's the other thing that's going to happen, parents and kids, if you're watching this, you're not only catching up, the kids that are not doing what you're doing are starting to fall behind. So as everyone's getting older, even if they're ahead of you now, all of a sudden, here's you go by them, and then you're like, see if they don't start to do the right things as well.
Yeah.
And it's just a huge hole in overall human development, not just for athletics, but just in life to not have the opportunity or take the opportunity or being in an environment in our society where we roll, crawl, climb, go across monkey bars, change elevation, and get strong young. If you're a parent and you have really, really young ones and you don't know what to do, like, they're toddlers, put them in gymnastics, is my, like, put them in gymnastics for a couple years. Not so that, like, gymnastics can be tough too. Yeah, we're going to get them competing and put them, no. Fundamental movements from gymnastics are great. I'm a huge, huge proponent of that. Something like my gym can be great where they're just being kids, they get the chance to socialize. But as you and I have seen, younger and younger parents are reaching out to us to do one-on-one private training with, an 8-year old. And it's
I'm not
like
doing that
there's
anymore.
there's easier things to do. Have
Yeah.
play dates and let them run around the backyard.
Yeah. Or, I mean, the reality is in today's world, both parents are working full time more.
Hmm.
And it's okay to outsource, I think. If you like really can't make the time to play a lot, I mean, you should. But like we've been saying, there's a lot of performance coaches like Jeremy Frisch's of the world, Dave Gleason, who have a program for younger kids appropriate to that age and the skills they need to develop young and making it really fun. So yes, it can be okay to outsource to a performance coach who gets that or sign them up for gymnastics class. I think those are just some realistic solutions in today's day and age. I
Yeah,
mean, there's a
that's a
bunch
good
of
point.
other reasons why play has stopped. I think the coddling of the American mind like sums it up really well. Parents are scared now that their child's going to get abducted by whatever, and it's a legitimate fear and I get that, but the stats that that book presents of that actually happening is very interesting, so I recommend you read that book as well. Kids do need to get on the playground for sure, but if your family is so busy you need to outsource, not a big deal. Everyone makes their own family decisions and that's fine.
Hmm.
Now,
Yeah, I agree 100%.
how much
I
time do you have left? I had one more question.
I would love to go through one more thing.
Okay, so I know we talked about the rise in pediatric ACL injuries, and I don't like the fear mongering around it, but the stats are the stats. The rise in pediatric ACL injuries in female athletes, especially in that 13 to 14 range, and I've heard as young as age 12 as well from a lot of surgeons. It's higher than it ever has been. That's just the
Hmm.
reality of it. And
Hmm.
I think it just kind of ties into what we've been talking about and why is this occurring? Well, could it be that lack of physical development prior to age 12? Could it be that lack of movement exploration and working different muscle groups in their bodies? Oh, could it also be a strength coach not really understanding when to gradually progress that load in the 12 to 14 age range? I mean, it's so many things. Or maybe girls in the 12 to 14 age range haven't even gotten into a gym environment, which is a whole other problem. They absolutely should be getting into a gym environment then. So, what are your thoughts on all this? Because the truth is, pediatric ACLs have risen. And I think it's because of what you and I have been discussing in this episode.
I agree 100%. If it's not done the right way, the stress and strain on soft tissue, including ligaments like the ACL, goes through the roof. So imagine your 12-year-old daughter has a tired ACL that's underdeveloped. I've seen studies from D1 college athletes where they took MRI imaging of their ACLs and they showed the before and then at the end of the season, so preseason, end of the season. And these were unhealthy ACLs. You wouldn't believe the inflammation in those ACLs. They were like thick, they were inflamed and tired. That's in a D1 physically mature athlete that's getting, by all intensive knowledge, the right training, right? So imagine that you've got this ACL in a 12-year-old who they've been loading the wrong way. So there's extra stress in the gym, which is supposed to be helping them on the field, on that ACL. Now they've got, I talked to you last week about 8 games in 11 days. Eight. And this girl is a midfielder who goes 18-18, and she gets subbed out the last 5 minutes of every half. Imagine how tired that ACL is. These are the first two tournaments of the season. Now let's fast forward. It's the end of the season. They're not ready. And I think this goes largely to your point because it's what we talk about. They're not ready for the load. It's a loading issue. They haven't had the opportunity to adapt to that load to get strong enough to handle it with strength training. And the other thing that we talked about, and I'm hoping you were leading into this with me, is we go back to the lack of free play, creative play in the backyard, in the neighborhood, on the playgrounds, and in PE growing up, and the lack of these gamified situations to help them move in multiple different directions. And instead, from the time they're 6 years old, everything's rehearsed. They're lacking, they are lacking the ability to predict, anticipate, and then react to what's actually happening in a soccer game. So, in my opinion, I haven't studied this yet, but I've been doing this for 3 decades. And in the last 4.5 years, I've helped 12 kids return to play from ACL injuries, all under the age of 14. And in training them, I can clearly see those things were lacking. In my opinion, what happens on the field is they have to push and accelerate and have more power to make up for lost time when they can't react appropriately. If you're reacting late, you have to work harder to get to where you already should be. And in my opinion, that is a major, major contributor to the rise in ACL injuries, along with load management is not even a thing. They haven't been in a position to strength train, or they're not strong enough to handle the loads, the demands that are placed on their young, developing bodies.
That's such a good point, Dave, and I love that you shared that study about even well-trained soccer players, the ACL still kind of deteriorating at the end of the season, and it just really confirms the points we've been making in this episode. We want our athletes to make time for that physical development, starting at those younger ages, getting that variety. I can tell you there's a lot of research behind ligaments loving variety.
Mm-hmm.
So, very key to not do the same repetitive movements and training over and over again. And I always say, look, strength training can count as a separate sport too, because they're moving in different planes, they're working different muscle groups. So, that's really key. And now we've opened another can of worms with the brain impact on ACLs, which means that play and games young and variety young is even more important. So I do have research on this and it's very fascinating. It's a very growing field, but Jason Avedisian, who is the head of sports science, I believe at Clemson University, he wrote a really cool paper. I think it was in 2021, and it talks about how slower reaction times and just slower processing speeds of what's around you in a chaotic setting in sports can lead to poor lower body mechanics and failure in the knee and a wrong step or a misstep under high speeds and chaos. So there is something to this. And it's why I continue, just like Dave, to get so frustrated when I see really young kids not just going through rehearsed planned drills on social media, but their heads are always down. Their focus is so narrow on their feet and they don't have a broad view of reality. So what does that do? Oh, that lowers reaction times. They have no spatial awareness. They have no ability to scan the field and their surroundings. So yes, there's something to this.
Hmm.
So again, it's just so important to take them through the proper steps young and then make sure they're getting into that gym setting. Ligaments love variety. Ligaments love strength. They love multiple muscle groups being strong. I mean, we can't ignore all of this.
I agree 100%. And where my brain just went is, if you know, I am a parent, but when my kids were younger, if I was in this situation where I'm learning all this information from you and myself, I'm thinking, well, what do I do? Let's say I can't get to, what can you control? We're talking about right now, anyway, we're talking about strength training, but we're also talking about reactivity in the brain. You know what else helps this? Get your kids to bed on time. Sleep. You know what doesn't help in all of this? And this will be a whole different study, I'm sure. This.
Mhm. That's that narrow focus of eyes down, same
It's
reality.
it's that,
Yeah.
and the myth is, well, no, they're reacting, they're playing games. This dysregulates the central nervous system. Guys, what that means is it gets overused, so it's almost numb. So this reduces their ability to react on the soccer field. It reduces it. This is controllable. Sleep is controllable. And then there are avenues and ways to get your kids into a gym setting or in a setting where they're getting what they need physically and mentally so that they can react better. Those ACLs can take on the forces that they're going to take on when they play. They're stronger. All the things we want for our kids, there are avenues. Start simple, because it's like anything else. Just start simple because it can be overwhelming. And then keep doing your research and finding ways to get them in a better situation. Because the way I see it right now, with every new study that comes out, the number of injuries is going up. It's not going down. We need to to slow the bus down and then get it going in the other direction because the kids are really being affected.
So to really just sum up this episode, resistance training, so critical for all ages, whether it's starting with body weight and then progressing to dumbbells and to hex bars and the barbells. There is a process at each step in the way. And just remember that resistance training doesn't mean barbells for everyone. It just means resistance against something. And every kid will start somewhere and progress differently than others. And I know you have a lot of resources on different fun games for the young ones. I have my female athlete high performance book. The longest chapter in the book is actually on youth development, and there's QR codes, video links to these games that train strength, agility, and speed in young ones that give them that ability to scan and keep their head up. So just get that. That's probably the cheapest thing you can do if you're not playing outside. Like just come up with some games with your family. And Dave, do you have anything else? I'll include all your links in the caption below, but anything else you can point everyone to?
Uh, I want to give a word of caution because a lot of times we get information and we just go off on our own anyway, and we'll Google or get on social media. And if you notice these days, when you Google anything, really, one of the first things to come up are social media sites, right? So just be careful if it's a trainer that says, I train young athletes, use social media to your advantage to ascertain, okay, who is this trainer training? Like now scroll through their feed and go deep. Don't go like the last couple days. Because if you don't see any videos or reels or carousel images or whatever, showing that trainer working with kids your kids' age, move on. Move on. Now I say that with bated breath because maybe they are qualified and they do, but they're not showing it. They're showing who they want to train and who they train most of the time. So, and there's a lot of online resources again, like myself. Erica's book is phenomenal. I'd start there. That's a real easy one. Myself, Jeremy Frisch. There are people out there, and we can point you in the right direction too.
Yep.
So if you're really, really struggling and you've watched this episode, reach out to Erica, reach out to myself. And if you're not local, we know a lot of people in the industry and we can even help you vet someone. If you're like, I think this person's good, what do you think? And I don't mean to put more of a workload on Erica, but I love that stuff because the number one thing I feel like our job is these days, or my job is to protect kids and their families. They need to be protected and they need the truth. So that's really been my crusade, especially the last 5 years, in addition to, obviously helping them perform better on the field. So I think that might be a good place for me to end.
Well, I think that's a great place to end. And you're right, Dave. We know a lot of people in the industry, and we have a lot of contacts in every state across the country. I know I have a lot of people who are in the Texas area. I know Texas is a big state, so Austin. I also have people in Boston and Massachusetts, like yourself, and a few in California. So if you need someone, feel free to reach out to us. Dave has a lot of contacts as well. We're also here as resources. And yeah, I think just do what you can fit in, but just know that you do have to make the time for resistance training. And I'll also link the episode that we did on in-season training. We give some really great advice on how to fit it in because everyone can fit it in year round, even if that means you do one time a week for a long period of time and that compound. So we provide some great solutions in that episode. So be sure to check it out because at this point, it's non-negotiable for all female athletes. So Dave, this was an epic discussion. I think each time I learned something new myself. So thank you again for coming on.
Oh, thank you so much. It was epic. It's mandatory. I'll just say that strength training is mandatory um, in the environment we now live in.
All right, everyone. We hope you enjoyed the episode today. Please share with someone who needs to hear this, and I will see you next time.